Well, I appreciate I'm standing between you and coffee and lunch and other such things, so I'll keep this fast. But I do have one key message I really want to dive into. For those of you that haven't come across me before, I always start my presentation the same way. I have a very brief introduction slide that I think very aptly tells you a lot about my career in security so far. I am a self-professed massive geek, and I spend about 60% of my time playing with the latest exploits, ripping apart the latest malware, kind of sitting in the labs, looking at what cyber criminals are up to. By the way, there are a number of Twitter versions of this. People have decided to deface me in wonderful ways. I really like this one. That might be one of the best things that's ever happened in my life. Regardless, so that's me. Here's what I want to talk to you about today. If you spend any time around any IT person, sooner or later, they'll say, our users don't listen to us. You've probably said it. Some of you probably said it today. But actually, I think that's wrong. I remember a couple of months ago, I don't remember exactly what I was doing except eating a club sandwich, saying, actually, I think our users, the people that listen to us, they listen to us a lot. I think we have to pry their ideas about security from their cold, dead fingers. If you go and ask a random person in the street what makes a good password, they don't say, I don't know. They tell you the exact advice we would have given them 6 years ago. Now, it's terrible advice now, but 6 years ago, they still remember it. So it's not that they don't listen to us, it's that it's actually hard to stay on top of what cyber criminals are doing. And sometimes I think we, in the security industry, are guilty of the same things. It's hard to stay on top of the latest interesting exploit techniques and what cyber criminals are doing. So let's talk very briefly about what I think is an incredibly important change in how we're all being attacked. By the way, if I get excited and start talking too quickly, someone just throw something, okay? Although no hot coffee or anything like that. So let's talk about the world we know. This was an interesting experience for me recently. I spent some time with a news program looking at where cyber criminals sell data. It's pretty obvious to all of us that you can make money from credit cards, but this for me was a bit of an interesting insight into the level of maturity of a modern cyber criminal. This is kind of staggering. Alphabase, some of you may have been to it. It's on what the journalists call the dark web, which of course for the rest of us is the internet, specifically the Tor network here. And what I love about this is it's a service where you can select a number of credit cards, you can buy them in bitcoins, and this service insists that you provide a GPG key so that when you buy the data, seconds later, a GPG encrypted file arrives with all of the information you need to conduct fraud. I really wish we could get actual retailers to have that kind of security, right? That's something to be proud of for the cyber criminals in that regard. In the same section here, we see usernames and passwords for sale, ranging from a number of cents up to, say, $30, $40 for access to networks. So it's highly industrialized transaction of information. So here's the challenge for us. If you go and ask any user what a scam looks like, they'll tell you about the Nigerian banker. My favorite one at the moment, have you seen it? There's an email going around where they're saying a Nigerian prince is stuck in space. Who came up with that? Help me, I need money to get someone back from space. And better still, who are the people that reply to that? These are a collection of some of what I think are the more ridiculous scams out there. You know, I'm old-fashioned. I remember when $1 million was a lot of money. Now, for scammers, it's all about $9 billion to get someone's attention. These are the laughable, ridiculous scams that we expect. Over the last 4 or 5 months, the quality of social engineering has increased insanely. We see better grammar. We see better spelling, no dodgy links. In fact, I took a lot of the scams from legitimate banks, a lot of the mails from legitimate banks, and a lot of the scams, compared them, and more often than not, if you take an organization's security policy advice, you choose the actual legitimate emails as the scams. They look worse and have worse spelling. So how do people react to this? Well, we wrote this tool. We wrote it in PHP because we like pain. And it's a tool that enables us to just do some simple tracking of things like USB payloads, defanged scams that we send out. And we use this in a lot of our social engineering testing to see what people will click on. By the way, anyone know what the most effective place to drop a USB key is if you want someone to plug it in and run it? Any ideas? Very quiet. Normally someone says the car park, which is close. Others say, you know, the kitchen. The gentleman's toilets. Who are these people that go into the toilets, pick up a USB and go, seems legit? And what I want to know is, do they wash it before they plug it in? Really? Ladies, you're doing a much better job, far down the list, obviously far more suspicious about USB keys found in toilets. Regardless, we send a couple of thousand emails out to people across these various social engineering engagements. We sent some emails with obvious scam traits and others less. So first off, the tax refund, always a good one. 8 people clicked on our snare if it was correctly spelt, good links, nice-looking images, and so on. No one if we made an obvious stereotypical error. So what that tells me is none of you believe that you're getting a tax refund ever, right? It's not going to happen. A few more examples. Here's my resume, my CV. Incredibly effective. Apparently, we expect bad spelling in our resumes because everyone pretty much clicks on it with the same rate of conversion. The Amazon package. This is always a favorite of mine. How many of you use Amazon? A lot of you? Yes, I use Amazon all the time, and I buy things, and then I forget. So like 3 days later, a thing turns up, and it's like Christmas, but where I'm Santa Claus to myself, like time traveler's present giving, maybe. Again, incredibly effective. A large number of people will click on something that looks reasonably authentic. Very few, something if you change a few of those traits to be more stereotypical. A payment advice. Well, people love money, so obviously this is a good one. There is, of course, a category of people that can never be helped. So we wanted to measure that as well. And we came up with this ridiculously asinine email, bruh, do you even click my links? Of which 19 people apparently will click literally anything you send them. I think the only appropriate internet meme is this one. Something that could feature in many security presentations, I'm sure. So what can we take from this? Well, let's look at some of the more effective campaigns out there at the moment. This is a big one. I'm sure many of you have seen it. The attackers effectively mail around an invoice or a payment advice. In some cases, malware will now search through your inbox looking for any reference to payment information, and they reply supplying different banking data. A friend of mine runs a small marketing business. It's about 10 employees. He's the CEO, and his wife is the CFO. maybe a little grand titles for a 10-person company, but you get the idea. He recently received one of these scams, and he received an email that was spoofed from his wife's email address, the CFO, slight typo variation, to him. He told me, straight-faced, the only reason I didn't fall for the scam is because my wife is never that nice to me. That seems like a poor security detection routine here in 2016. I feel like we should be able to do a little bit better. These are incredibly effective. Now, these word-based scams here are pretty fascinating. They've been a real kind of tenet of cybercriminal success for some time. They feature a lot of tracking mechanisms. And let me show you a few of the more interesting recent examples here. So first off, we're seeing a lot of documents like this. This is a localized sample. So you can see it provides lots of interesting content. I can't read much of it. That's a trend we're seeing way more of. So not just all in American English, but targeted regionally. Of course, enabling content executes a macro that downloads the malicious code. We see a mix of use of macros and exploits as well. This one's fun. I love this one. Security warning. The content is encrypted. Isn't it funny how much this encryption looks like Photoshop blur? I really would love encryption that actually worked that way. Wouldn't that be cool? So that's clever. I mean, you send this out, suppliers form, lots of people are likely to click it. All right? Let's have a look at another one here. Let's upgrade the quality of our samples again. And these are far from the Nigerian prints that most people would expect, right? I love this one. This one, professes to come from an official government body. And what I love is the cyber criminals provide instructions on how to disable your security. This is like the technical equivalent of asking people nicely to infect themselves. It's actually very polite and British, actually. So let's look. You have 2003? Just do this. 2007? No problem. We've got you covered. Here's how you deploy your malicious code. But it goes further, and I really love this one. Look at this. This is the document that says it's got RSA encrypted content. That's brilliant, isn't it? What do we know about encryption? It's used to protect sensitive, interesting information. It's a security control. So as soon as people see this, particularly IT people, oh, well, obviously it's important. I should probably decrypt it. Weekend challenge for you. Write RSA decryption and encryption in macros in VBA. Sounds like the least fun task ever. I've actually checked. It's not actual valid encryption. I was really hoping it was going to be like base 64 and you'd decode it and it would be like, lol, that's funny or something. But it appears to just be gibberish as far as I can tell. So again, clever social engineering, borrowing logos. Very, very effective technique here. Now, if you look at the distribution of the exploits these guys are using, you might think this slide is particularly ancient. There's about a half divide between use of exploits and the use of just good old-fashioned macros asking the user nicely. You'll see here a massive use of an exploit from 2012. Again, this is an expectation problem. A lot of people started listening to us about Java, Flash, browsers. There's been a huge push for security in the browser environment and plugins, given how much of an effective exploit environment that's been. But we still have a huge number of people running relatively outdated Office software. I did a walkthrough recently of an exploit, the 2014-1761. It takes about 50 minutes to go through the entire ROP chain, how it bypasses ASLR, using a nice little mscomctl.ocx file. It's available online for those of you that are more nerdy. Some of these require quite extreme skill to put together. So isn't it interesting we now have so many of them relying on basic social engineering using things like macros? So clearly, we all need to go back to our security policies, our awareness policies, and challenge some of the things we tell our users. What else is a challenge? I have heard this so many times recently. You see someone with a dodgy email on their laptop. They're like, oh, I'm not sure about this email. You know what I'll do? I'll open it on my phone because my phone is a bastion of invulnerability. It's protected by uber Apple powers, so nothing could ever go wrong. Dramatization may not be true. The point is, people think these devices are perfect. And I'm certainly not going to tell you that they're as bad as a traditional computer. But that doesn't make you invulnerable to being scammed, and they certainly are far from perfect. If you want a wonderful example of that, go take a look at the recent Happy Day English Zerg helper app. A lot of people in the security community missed it. Someone was able to implement an app, get it into the Apple App Store, and this app, when you opened it anywhere in the world, except China, was a terrible app that translated English and Chinese phrases. When you opened it in China, it was an app store. So we've got an app in the App Store that has an app store inside of it. It's deliciously meta, isn't it? Inside this App Store, they had dynamic Lua-based updating. And when you got an application you wanted to install from this App Store, it implemented a mock version of the iTunes client for Windows on top of iOS, which in technical terms is freaking awesome. From there, they did a signing request, got an Apple developer certificate, and could deploy anything you want. This barely made news in our community, but for multiple months there was an app in the App Store that completely violated the walled garden that supposedly all users trust. That's kind of a big deal. So we thought, wouldn't it be fun to take some mobile applications spanning iOS and Android? There's a technical report coming out that goes through all this in more depth. But in the spirit of a quick run-through, we took 1,002 of these and did some analysis of the basic kind of security implementation. Things like transport layer security, protection of secrets, and so on. How deserving of our trust are these devices? 306 of those applications failed to implement TLS correctly. They failed to implement something like certificate pinning. They continued supporting a very old version. These are apps used by tens to hundreds of thousands of users. If you're here in 2016 as an application developer and you have an app that's that popular and you fail to even be able to implement secure connections, TLS, most of the work's done for you, how good do we really feel about their other information practices? Some of my real favorites. This was amazing. This was a transport app that several times a day was sending out to all of its users an unencrypted copy of its Twitter API key. For months on end, anyone can grab this and immediately become that particular company on Twitter. Direct messages, the works. No one noticed. It shows you the level of scrutiny that's being paid to these platforms compared to the traditional ones. Do I think they're as bad as the PC? No. But the maturity of the tools to do security research, the focus of security researchers, is far less. We found plain text passwords, ancient versions of hashing, a myriad of flaws that really remind me of PCs like 5 years ago. So I don't have much more time to rant here, but this talk really was about one thing. I spend a lot of my time stepping through interesting recent exploits, looking at recent hacks, doing technical work. I think here in 2016, looking at these social engineering techniques that are proving effective, looking at how many cybercriminals aren't using exploits, but are convincing our users with techniques they don't expect. I think it's time for all of us in this room to go back to our policies, to go back to our expectations about how scams work, to challenge them and make sure we're up to date and our users are as well. I hope you enjoyed that brief rant. Thank you very much for listening to me. Appreciate it's not so easy in Spanish. Have a good day.